My son banned me from my grandchild's birthday, so I quietly left and cut them off after a month. Have you ever sat in your own child's home and felt like a stranger, heard the laughter echoing from the living room, and known, deep down, it wasn't meant for you? Set breakfast on the table only to quietly clear it later because no one touched it. My name is Lorraine. I'm 67. I live in Vermont. I used to be the one who cooked every holiday meal for this family. Now, I'm the one they told not to come to my granddaughter's birthday. No argument, no explanation, just a glance that looked past me and a quiet sentence that stung more than a shout. It's not necessary anymore. I used to think if I stayed quiet, stayed out of the way, I'd always have a place in that house. But I was wrong. When you're silent too long, people stop seeing you. And one day, you realize they never pushed you out. They just cleared the space and waited for you to get the message. I was a grade school teacher. Lost my husband when I was 52. Moved in with Craig, my only son, not long after. Craig is kind, or maybe just conflict avoidant. He rarely says no, but he's never said enough either. His wife, Melinda, is sharp, organized, always in control, a bit rigid. She doesn't hate me. She just doesn't see a need for me. Sierra, the oldest granddaughter, is 15. Looks at me like I've wandered into a private life where I don't belong. And Noah, the youngest, quiet, gentle. His eyes are the only thing that haven't changed when they meet mine. Have you ever felt like a stranger in your own home? Not because no one's around, but because every look, every word, every gesture tells you you don't belong anymore. As if among the people you once called family, you've quietly become an outsider. I don't know what's ahead, but with this decision, something in me feels lighter. And maybe that's enough. I used to place every candle on Noah's birthday cake. This year, they told me not to come. That morning was crisp. October had just begun in Vermont, but the chill always arrived earlier than the forecast ever said. I woke at 5:52 like I always do. The kitchen lights were off. I prefer it that way. Just the soft, gray light from the window, guiding me to the coffee shelf. I opened the tin of beans, scooped each spoonful by hand, into the drip machine. The smell rose warm and steady, like a silent kind of comfort. On the kitchen radio, the AM station was talking about lane closures on the interstate. I don't drive. I never take the interstate, but I still listened. At the table, I folded red cloth napkins with white trim, once in half, then again, corners perfectly aligned. No one uses them. Melinda prefers plain white paper napkins, but I fold those cloth ones every morning, like a quiet way of saying I still exist in this house. It was Saturday. Noah would turn 13 in a few days, but Melinda had decided to celebrate. Early weekends were more convenient for everyone. A few days ago, I had pulled out the little notebook from my nightstand drawer, planning to list the ingredients for a chocolate blueberry cake, his favorite since he was little. But this morning, I waited. I wanted to see if anyone would mention it. At 7:43, the first footsteps echoed through the hallway. Melinda came in, hair pinned up tight, workout clothes, white sneakers, freshly wiped. She walked straight to the coffee machine, but didn't open it. Just paused, watching me set a plate on the table. "Mom," she said. No smile. I turned around. "Yes, dear. We've decided. It's best if you don't come to Noah's party this week." I hadn't even formed a reply when she continued. "We're hosting it somewhere else. A small place that just opened on Elm Street. Just a few of his close friends. Nothing big. We just don't think it's the right atmosphere for you." I placed the unfinished plate down. Why? My voice was soft, but steady. Not because I expected it, but because something in me had grown used to this kind of announcement. Melinda looked up. "Let's not make this complicated, Mom. It's just easier for everyone if you're not there." I turned away, picked up a cloth, wiped the rim of a glass. Did Noah say anything? She avoided my eyes. He's still young. He shouldn't have to feel that pressure. Then she turned to grab her cereal bowl and said no more. Craig walked in, then his hair, damp eyes puffy from a heavy night's sleep. He sat down, picked up the newspaper I'd set out like every morning. I asked Craig, "What do you think?" Without looking at me, he turned a page. Melinda's right. I sat down. No one asked if I'd eaten. No one noticed the coffee had gone cold. I was about to ask again when Sierra came down the stairs. Headphones, in crop hoodie, filming herself on her phone. "You didn't start the cake, Grandma?" she asked, chewing gum. "Oh, right. You probably forgot the call." I looked up. "What call?" She gave a half smile, shook her head. "Never mind." Craig snapped his paper shut, casting a look at me sharp enough to silence anything that might follow. I glanced toward Melinda. She dropped her bowl in the sink and turned back to me. "Please, Mom, don't turn this into something bigger than it is. This is for Noah." I wanted to say, if this is really for Noah, why can't I be there? But I said nothing. Footsteps from upstairs. Noah, slow, dragging. He wasn't fully awake, hair tousled, pillow lines still faint on his cheek. When his eyes met mine, he paused mid-step. His lips moved slightly as if to ask something. But then, Craig, my son, looked up from his paper. No words, just a glance. Cold. And Noah lowered his head. Didn't ask. Didn't speak. He came down the rest of the stairs, walked into the kitchen, stood at the sink, filled a glass, hands trembling slightly. He didn't look at me, or anyone. Melinda walked over, placed her hand on his shoulder, leaned in and whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. You're okay. I understand." Her voice was soft, eyes gentle, but I knew those words weren't for Noah. They were for me. Every word, "I understand." It wasn't comfort. It was closure. I picked up my cold coffee, left the table. Before I stepped out of the kitchen, I heard Sierra murmur, "Maybe this birthday will be calmer." I went back to my room, closed the door, didn't lock it. I never lock it. On the wooden shelf beside the bed was a stack of old Sunday papers. I pulled one out, clipped a coupon for laundry detergent, folded it small, and tucked it into my wallet. No one saw, no one asked. The third drawer of my vanity held an old cardboard box, corners worn with time. I opened it. Inside were birthday cards, most from Noah. One he'd written at 3 years old, all scribbled pencil lines. Another from when he was 8, neatly printed with cupcake stickers. I picked up the 8-year-old card. The edges had turned yellow. "Grandma makes the best cake," it read. Those words still looked fresh, like he'd written them yesterday. I sat there for a long time. Outside the window, red leaves scattered across the yard. I heard Walter, my neighbor, call out from next door. "Chilly morning, huh, Lorraine?" I didn't answer, just nodded through the glass. And I thought, if I once lit every candle on Noah's birthday cake, today I'm the one they blew out. I used to think living quietly was enough to belong. But if you're too quiet, they forget you're still here. They say I talk too much. But it's been a whole week, and I haven't been able to say a single word. It started raining that afternoon. Soft, steady drops brushed against the kitchen window, sliding down the glass like memories, trying to wash themselves clean. I sat at the table, holding a cup of cold tea, staring at a curling corner of the paper taped to the fridge, Noah's birthday party schedule. A day I was no longer allowed to be part of. I wasn't angry anymore, but I still wanted to understand. When did one small sentence become enough reason to cast someone out like a threat? I tried to trace it back, and then the memory returned, sudden and clear, like a door blown open by the wind, a phone call. Harmless, I thought. 2 weeks ago. That day, I had a routine blood pressure check. The small clinic sits behind the old bookstore, about 7 blocks from home. I walked there holding my appointment slip and a little wallet with my AARP card. There were 2 other women in the waiting room, both staring at their phones, no one speaking. I sat quietly, looking at the fake cactus on the table and listening to the heater tick. The nurse, Julie. I remember her name clearly because of her curly hair, tied half up, and the way she spoke, slowly read questions off a form. After a few routine ones, she asked, "Who lives in your household with you?" "My son, his wife, and their 2 kids," I answered. She checked a box. Main source of income. I hesitated, then said, "My son gets disability support, but sometimes he picks up woodworking jobs, fixing fences, building porches, things like that." I gave a small smile. "He's good with his hands. Can't sit still too long." Julie didn't react, just nodded and kept filling out the form. Then came the questions about medications and flu shots. It all felt routine. I didn't mention it to anyone. What was there to say? But a week later, I walked into the kitchen and found Melinda holding a thick white envelope, hands trembling slightly, eyes wide. Craig stood beside her, pale. I had just set down my Walgreens bag when she looked up, her voice nearly a shout. "What did you say at the clinic?" I froze. "What about Craig? About work? Did you mention anything?" I blinked. "Just that he takes on a few jobs now and then." I didn't think, she snapped. "Didn't think. But you still said it. Do you know how serious that is? You could get us disqualified from his disability. Do you understand?" That I stepped back. I just told the truth. Tara walked in, then holding a juice glass, moving like she was visiting a friend, not living in someone else's home. She tilted her head, gave me a look like I was a crack in the hardwood floor. "Guess someone doesn't know how to keep her mouth shut," she said, sipping her drink. She turned to Melinda. "That mail from the benefits office." Melinda nodded, then looked at me again. "You realize this could cost us everything. His support, the housing, help the kids' insurance. Do you even get that I wanted to say, I didn't mean to, that I didn't think a simple conversation could unravel so much. But every time I opened my mouth, Melinda cut in. From now on, stay out of everything. No more calls. Don't answer any questions. No surveys. No updates, nothing. And as for this weekend, Noah's birthday, don't bother." I stood there like a schoolgirl being scolded in front of the class. Tara passed by, smiled without warmth. "They call that a risk factor. You know," she whispered to Melinda, but loud enough for me to hear. I looked up. She glanced back at me, smug and satisfied. Craig still hadn't said a word. He sat down, turned on the TV, pretending none of this was happening. I looked at him, hoping for something, anything. A furrowed brow, a glance of defense. But nothing. His eyes stayed glued to the financial news. I turned away, walked out the back door, trying to breathe again. The air smelled of damp leaves and rotting wood. Walter, our neighbor, peered over the fence. "Raining again." "Huh," I nodded. I didn't have it in me to speak. That evening, I walked to Walgreens for joint cream and cotton pads. The cashier asked, Do you have a membership card? I handed her my AARP card, like always, paid in cash, slid the receipt into my wallet. As I left, I caught my reflection in the glass door, a woman standing between fluorescent lights and the darkness of the street. Familiar, and yet somehow a stranger. When I got home, I saw Noah sitting in the hallway, books open, but eyes unfocused. I slowed down, about to pass him, when he spoke quietly. "Grandma." I stopped. He looked down at his hands. "Did you do it on purpose?" I sat beside him, angling slightly, so I wouldn't brush his shoulder. "No, Noah, I didn't. They're really mad." I nodded. "I know." "Because they're scared of losing the money." I didn't answer. I looked at my hands, thin, knobby fingers, swollen from age. The same hands that used to fold napkins, mix batter-light birthday candles. Noah looked up, his eyes glossy. "I don't think you're bad." I gave a faint smile, small enough to go unnoticed. "I don't think I'm bad either. But sometimes, Noah, it's not about who's right or wrong. It's just about who yells louder." We sat there in silence. The living room lights clicked on. Warm yellow spilled across the hardwood floor. Melinda's voice carried from the kitchen. Pans clanging a complaint about milk left out too long. Little things, but enough to remind me I didn't belong in any scene anymore. When Noah stood, he looked back at me. "I still want you at my birthday." Then he walked away without waiting for an answer. I stayed a moment longer, then stood, returned to my room, and shut the door. I placed my wallet on the table, opened the drawer, pulled out the little notebook, the last page still holding a flower coupon I hadn't used. I didn't write anything new, because sometimes it doesn't take shouting to break someone's heart. Just one sentence, whispered like wind through a cracked window. "You're really such a burden, Mom." I left early in the morning. No one stopped me, and no one knew. I had no intention of coming back. The sky hadn't fully brightened yet. Just a gray fog, as if the heavens themselves were trying to hide something the world no longer cared about. I sat at the edge of the bed, listening to the tick of the clock on my nightstand. Each second, a quiet reminder that I was still here, even if no one called my name anymore. I had packed everything the night before. A small rolling suitcase waited at my feet, zipper slightly rusted, but still working. I didn't bring much: one thick coat, 2 changes of clothes, my blood pressure pills, and an old photo album. No makeup, no keepsakes. All I needed now was silence and a door I could close behind me without anyone asking me to stay. I looked around the room one last time. The photo of Noah and me at the park. He was 5, learning to ride his bike. I left it behind. Not because I didn't want it, but because I didn't want him to see it disappear. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The light was still dim. Craig sat on the couch, eyes glued to the TV. The voices from the show echoed across the living room flat, meaningless. He didn't turn around when he heard my suitcase rolling behind me. Melinda was in the kitchen. I heard pots clinking, smelled coffee from the drip machine. She didn't say a word. I stood there at the doorway for a moment, just long enough, perhaps, for someone to look up, to ask something, anything, but nothing came. It all unfolded like I was just stale air in this house, something no one touched anymore. Sierra passed through the hall, phone in hand. Her screen reflected her face mid-filter. When she saw me, she paused. I don't know if it was surprise or discomfort, but she didn't speak. She just raised an eyebrow and kept walking, like I was something misplaced in the living room, too unimportant to pick up. Noah. He stood at the end of the hall, hand resting on the doorframe hair, tousled the kitchen light, casting half his face in gold, the other in shadow. He didn't say a word, but he nodded just once, a quiet goodbye. And in that look, I saw the last piece of myself, still welcome here. I nodded back, then turned away. Outside, misty rain fell softly on the stone walkway. I gripped the suitcase handle tighter. My coat flapped in the wind. Each step past the front yard felt like walking across memory. The spot where I once knitted a scarf for Sierra in preschool. The rose bush I planted that never bloomed. I didn't look back, not until I crossed through the gate. And then I did, not to hold on, but to remind myself this was final. The house hadn't changed. Same curtains, same peeling paint. Only one thing was different. Now I was no longer part of any frame inside. I pulled my suitcase 3 blocks past the corner grocery, the barber shop where Walter still gets his trim every month, and down to the lake. I had walked around the lake just yesterday. I remembered every lamppost, every bench. In my heart, I quietly said goodbye to them all, the way old friends part, without explanation. A golden maple tree leaned toward the water's edge, its leaves still as vivid as the year I moved in with Craig. Back then, I thought just a few months, just until they get settled. But a few months turned into years, and I became just another figure in the house, familiar but easily overlooked. The little bus stop at the end of the street was empty, except for a young woman clutching her jacket earbuds in. I sat on the bench by the rusted vending machine back against the wall. The bus arrived on time. The door opened. The driver didn't ask questions. I climbed on paid with the coins I had counted the night before. I took the window seat 2 rows behind the driver. As the bus pulled away, I didn't look back at the house, just at the streets around it. Every corner had been a piece of my life. Now, none of them asked me to stay. I pulled out my phone, silenced it, and tucked it deep into the inside pocket of my coat. I didn't need them to know where I was going. They never asked where I'd come from. The bus rumbled past back roads, then onto the highway. I leaned my head against the window, listening to the rain patter against the roof. No calls, no messages. I had no map, no plan, just a small bag and a morning cold enough to cut through wool. The bus pulled out of town at 7:40. I sat by the window, watching familiar blocks slip behind. The porch I once swept every autumn morning. The laundry room window where I used to wait for the spin cycle to end. I didn't look back again. The studio I found was a small room behind a nail salon on Court Street. Thin walls, a sticky lock, no place for shoes, but it had a table. In silence. The kind I hadn't known in years, not even in my own home. I lived there for almost a month. No one called, no one knocked, and I thought maybe they felt lighter without me. Maybe I did too. Each morning I brewed my coffee by hand, set down the paper no one would read. At night, the glow from the nail salon flickered against the sheer curtain light from somewhere else, unrelated, unaffected. I never said goodbye, but after a month of silence, the one name I never expected was the first to call. It was a Thursday morning. I was just lifting my cup when the phone vibrated. A name lit up, a name I thought I'd never see on my screen again. Noah, 12 letters, more than 30 days of silence, over 240 hours of nights. I set my lukewarm coffee down. My palms suddenly felt damp. I had imagined if anyone were to call, After all this time, it would be Melinda. To blame, to bargain, to accuse. Or maybe Craig. His voice, stiff, uncertain. You can visit Noah if someone's not home. But it wasn't them. It was Noah. I reached for the screen, hadn't even tapped answer, and the call ended. No voicemail, no message, just one ring, then silence. I checked the time, 6:17 a.m. Drizzle outside, wind slipping through every window crack, reminding me that November in Vermont was never gentle. I sat in my tiny studio behind the Vietnamese nail salon. Thin walls, a water stain on the ceiling, shaped like a lopsided heart. The room barely held a single iron bed, a small electric burner, and a fold-up table that doubled as a dining surface, and a spot for my newspaper. On that table, a half-finished skein of yarn, the scarf I was knitting. Each stitch a night, without anyone calling my name. A quiet promise to myself, don't remember, don't expect, don't open up. Then the phone rang again. Not Noah, Craig. I let it ring. Then again, Melinda. Voicemail pinged. I didn't check it right away. I stood, poured warm water, sat back down. My hands were trembling. I flipped through the Black Friday flyer, flat discounts on TVs, ovens boxed cake mix. Things I once used to prepare family holidays. Now just glossy paper. I opened the voicemail. Craig's voice came first. Hoarse. Mom, it's about Noah. Please call us. Please. Then Melinda's short, sharp, urgent. He's missing. 2 days now. No phone. No one knows where he is. I sat still. Was this real? Then the phone buzzed again. Walter. I've seen them calling you nonstop, he said, voice hushed, like a man whispering in church. I'm worried. It's about Noah, isn't it? I answered. I don't know yet, he sighed. I've never seen that boy look sadder than when you left. I hung up, waited a few minutes, then I called Noah's school. The front office transferred me to Ms. Jensen, Clara Jensen. She remembered me from parent conferences 2 years back. Her voice didn't sound surprised. Mrs. Lorraine, I'm glad you called. I probably shouldn't say much, but Noah's had a hard time since you left. Hard time, I asked. He was moved out of his room after a fight. His sister called him a traitor for standing up for you. He said you didn't deserve what happened. That night, he slept in the basement. I gripped the phone tighter. The next day, he came to school, didn't speak all day. When I asked, he said, I wish I could live with my grandma. And now he's missed 2 days. They say he ran away, but I think he was pushed out. I thanked her and hung up. One voicemail remained. Sierra, cold, detached. If he comes back, great. If not, whatever. I set the phone down. My hand brushed the unfinished scarf. I stared at it, whispered, to no one. He didn't run away. He was pushed. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay beneath the water-stained ceiling, the heart-shaped blotch, warped like it had been crushed by an invisible hand. I thought of Noah, his small frame, wide eyes whenever I told him stories, how he used to hold my hand and never let go, not even during scary parts of movies. I thought of the last thing he said to me, I still want you at my birthday. And I hadn't gone. I got up, pulled a chair to the window, cracked it open. The rain was still falling, not heavy, just enough to hear each drop land on the metal roof. I picked up my phone, scrolled the screen, paused. No message, no call back. I slipped the phone into my coat pocket, took a deep breath. If he still believes in me, then now is the time to do what I should have done years ago. The next morning, An unfamiliar number flashed on my screen. I almost didn't answer, but something quiet, something deep, lifted my hand. On the other end, a tired but familiar voice. "Grandma, I don't know where to go, but I don't want to go back there." I asked, "Are you safe?" "I'm staying at a friend's, but I just want to come to you." I didn't ask anything more. I just said, "Send me the address. I'm coming." When I opened the door, he didn't hug me, just nodded. But in his eyes, I saw the same look I'd seen when my mother died. Before picking up Noah, I called Walter. I knew he wouldn't ask many questions. "I need a ride," I said. To see who he asked, voice soft, like asking if it was time for dinner. "I think my grandson." "Let's go," he replied. People our age don't need to explain, just need to know we're doing the right thing. He drove me in his old pickup, cracked leather seats, and a heater that still worked. We didn't speak on the way, just the swish of wipers and the rain tapping on the roof like an old habit. We met Noah at a small diner next to a gas station. I arrived first, sat by the window, ordered 2 slices of apple pie and 2 cups of ginger tea. Jolene, the waitress, with a smile, like late autumn sunlight, didn't ask if I was expecting someone. She just set down 2 sets of cutlery, poured the tea, and said, "Stay as long as you like, hun." Noah walked in just as I was opening the butter packet. He sat across from me, backpack still on. We didn't talk about the old house. Didn't mention Melinda, or Craig, or Sierra. We just looked at each other, then lowered our heads and ate. The pie was warm, crust flaky, filling just sweet enough. I watched him take small bites, slow and careful, like someone trying to swallow months of starving for affection. I paid in cash, slipped $2 extra beneath the receipt. Not much, but enough for someone to know I hadn't forgotten how to say thank you. Jolene nodded as I left. "Keep warm, hon," she said. I nodded back, didn't speak, but her smile stayed with me longer than the rain did. Back at the apartment, Noah stood just outside the door, gripping the straps of his backpack. His hoodie was speckled with rain. He looked thinner, paler under the hallway light. But his eyes, they were steady, not scared anymore, just quietly tired, in a way only the old can recognize instantly. I opened the door wide, didn't say, "Come in," didn't ask, "Have you eaten?" I just stepped back half a pace. He walked in. I closed the door behind him, letting the rain keep falling, like a past being washed away. The room felt smaller, almost like it had curled in to hold us both. The yellow light warmed the threadbare tablecloth. Outside the nail salon's neon open sign still blinked the hum of nail dryers, blending with soft Vietnamese ballads on the radio. Noah sat. His eyes scanned the space, as if seeing for the first time what peace looks like when it's not forced. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small photo frame, the 2 of us at the park. I remembered that day. He'd fallen off his bike. I had picked him up, wiped his tears, and we shared ice cream under the summer sun. He placed the photo on the table, didn't say a word. I went to the stove, filled a pot, started making chicken porridge. Not because he said he was hungry, but because I knew his body was fighting a kind of exhaustion words couldn't fix. When the porridge boiled, I shredded chicken, chopped scallions, served 2 bowls. Noah ate half, then stood. "I need to sleep," he said. I nodded. He pulled a blanket over the cot, the one that used to be mine. Now I was giving it to him. I didn't sleep. I sat on the little chair beside the fold-up table, continued knitting the unfinished scarf. Each stitch a breath, each row a memory slowly untangling itself. I watched him lying on his side, breathing evenly, his face calm. one hand near the edge of the blanket, and I wondered for just a moment if I'd had the strength to leave sooner. Could things have been different? Then I heard him murmur, voice raspy, half dreaming, "Thank you for not asking if I did something wrong." I didn't cry. I couldn't. But I knew if forgiveness ever lived in trust, this was it. I stood, placed his untouched bowl on the shelf. Gently, I pulled out another chair from the corner, set it by the table. It didn't match the old one. It was taller, squeaked when you sat, but I left it there. I added another chair to the table, and for the first time in years, I wasn't eating alone. 2 days later, Craig showed up. Alone. No call ahead. I didn't open the door right away. Let him stand in the drizzle. 11 minutes. I counted. When I finally opened it, he looked over my shoulder, searching for Noah. I blocked the doorway. Didn't invite him in. "I just came to talk," Craig said. "No one's forcing you into anything." I stayed silent. He ran a hand through his hair, sighed. "Melinda thinks if Noah stays, people will talk. About us, about our parenting, and the school he can't just skip like this." I looked at him like staring through cracked glass. "I didn't hear anyone complain when I lived in your house for 7 years. He didn't reply. Noah stood behind me, leaning against the kitchen frame, backpack still on. "I'm not going back," he said, voice rough but clear. Craig turned to him, brow furrowed. "This isn't your choice." "Then, who gets to choose?" Noah asked. "The people who never asked me what actually happened." No one answered. I closed the door. The rain picked up. 3 days later, Melinda came, unannounced. Before the knock, I already heard her heels on the cement, like she was pounding her frustration into each step. I cracked the door. She stood there, hair pulled tight beige, raincoat lips pressed thin. "Lorraine, I don't want to make a scene," she began. No smile, no greeting. "I'm just here to take my son home." I said nothing. She raised her chin. "I don't care what you told him. Noah is my son, and I have rights." I heard that word, rights, like she was gripping the last scraps of something long lost. Noah stepped into the doorway behind me, hands in his pockets, eyes blank. Melinda moved closer. "Noah, put on your coat." "I don't want to yell, but this isn't right. This isn't your home." He didn't move. She stepped back, looked at me. "I know you're playing the saint, but this won't end here." Her voice cracked. "I tried to keep things quiet, but if I have to, I'll go to the school, to a lawyer. You're keeping my son." Noah didn't flinch, didn't even look at her. He just said, "I'm not being kept. I'm choosing to stay." She opened her mouth, but said nothing. Moments passed. Then she turned, walked quickly to the car. Her keys slipped, clattered against the curb. She picked them up without looking back. I closed the door, softly, not because of the neighbors, but because I knew when someone like Melinda starts shouting, it means they've already lost control. And now I knew what I had to do. That night I sat down and wrote on a scrap of old paper, "Addison County Legal Aid." I don't know the law, but I know this. If I don't protect him now, no one else will. They don't call anymore, and that's when I knew they didn't miss us. They only missed having control. No more early morning rings. No more midnight voicemails that never had the courage to be said face to face. This silence, it wasn't like the silence from when I first left the old house. That silence still carried the sting of insults, threats, and control. Now, it was absolute. As if Noah and I had been wiped clean from their memory, like a file deleted from a worn-out hard drive. And I realized they weren't upset Noah left. They were upset they lost someone obedient, a boy who kept secrets, who stayed quiet no matter how he was treated. But now he'd quietly stepped out, and there was nothing left for them to protect. Not a person, an image, and control. I stood by the window. If you could call the narrow space between the bed and the hot plate a living room. Outside, a soft layer of snow rested on the nail salon roof. It was early December, cold, but bright, with thin winter light filtering through the blinds. On the wall, Noah had taped a new drawing charcoal sketch of two people standing under a tree. No one hidden, no one behind. I didn't ask, but I knew he was drawing us. The hearing was on a Wednesday morning at the Addison County Courthouse. I wore a gray sweater and the last scarf I'd knitted since leaving Craig's house. Noah walked beside me, hair freshly trimmed shirt, buttoned all the way up, but still wearing the same worn shoes I remembered from Easter last year. My lawyer, Bonnie Levin, was sharp, mid-50s, no time for small talk. But she always asked, "Are you holding up okay?" before getting to the legal points. Before the hearing, she opened her folder, letters from Ms. Jensen, old photos of Noah and me, notes about the emergency call the night Noah had a panic attack after being kicked out of his room, and a page from Noah's own journal. Grandma was the first place I ever felt safe. They didn't come. Not Craig, not Melinda. It was just me, Bonnie from Legal Aid, and Noah. We waited on cold wooden benches. I checked the time. 9:42. Right on schedule. No postponement. No, we're running late. They simply didn't show. Bonnie wasn't surprised. People who know they're wrong, but don't want to face it, they disappear, she said softly, flipping a page. Showing up would only make it worse for them. I nodded. I knew Craig too well. He couldn't bear to look a judge in the eye. Or worse, Noah's. And Melinda, she didn't stay home because she lost. She stayed home because she couldn't accept losing, especially to me. Silence used to be her weapon. Now, I used it to stand tall. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel victory. Just light. Like finally undoing a button I'd fastened wrong for years. The judge asked Noah, calm and even, "Do you want to live with your grandmother?" Noah stood tall, met his gaze. She's the first person who didn't make me pick sides. No defense needed. No one to blame. The paperwork was signed. Temporary became permanent. I held Noah's hand. I didn't cry. When we got home, yes, I'd learned to call this studio home. Noah took off his scarf, hung his coat, opened his backpack. He pulled out a new roll of drawing paper, stood on the wooden chair, taped his work to the wall. I watched him from behind. Didn't ask questions. Not just because I didn't want to interrupt, but because I was learning not to control, not to take up someone else's space with too much care. I simply said, "That's good." He nodded. That evening, I cooked dinner in the old stew pot, chicken, corn, carrots, the way my husband liked it in the early years of our marriage. Not because I wanted to relive the past, but because things cooked with memory always taste like something more. And today was special. A day with paperwork. But more than that, a day we could finally call this place ours. After dinner, Noah washed the dishes. I cleared the table. He went back to the bedroom, opened a book, then looked up. "Do you think people can start over at 67? I paused, not from surprise, but because it was the exact question I had asked myself 1 month ago on that bus, leaving the house I no longer belonged to. I smiled. "We'll find out, starting tomorrow." That night, after Noah fell asleep, I opened the desk drawer, pulled out a small wooden box. Inside, I placed old photographs, me, Craig, as a boy, Melinda, on her first visit, Sierra, at her school recital. I didn't burn them. didn't tear them, just tied them gently with a faded red ribbon and tucked them away in the deepest drawer, not to forget, but so I no longer had to live by what couldn't be changed. I walked to the window, looked out at the empty street. Winter in Vermont isn't lively, like other places, but it has its own kind of light, a kind of American quiet, not demanding, not denying, just there for anyone patient enough to see it. I didn't walk out of their lives because they pushed me. I walked out because, for the first time, I knew I could stand. I used to believe that quiet sacrifice was enough to earn a place in someone's heart. But the truth is, when you get used to being unseen, they get used to forgetting you were ever there. Some people aren't lost to death, but to being forgotten at dinner tables where no chair is set for them anymore. Like an old quilt that once kept the whole house warm, through winter folded and put away come spring, and no one remembers the nights it held them close through the cold. If this story made you pause, maybe it's time to take a look around your own life and ask yourself, who's being forgotten in the house that used to feel like home?